The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
Dude, this week been working like a maniac. I don't have a mansion, though.
I hate everything you like.
Come on.
No, so you said maybe. So here's the thing: is that a lot of times we're trying to figure out like what game to play, and this is our spooky title because we're pulling of The Simpsons and airing it.
We're recording this right. We're recording this on Halloween Eve. Halloween Eve.
Yeah.
Right.
All Hallows Eve. Yeah.
They won't get it till later.
Right. Exactly. So, we're pulling of The Simpsons, right? So we're trying to find a spooky title. And you texted me while my son was having a meltdown and my daughter was getting swifty all over the living room floor or whatever, right? Like everything was going to hell. And you're like, maybe I can trick you into playing Maniac Mansion. And I was like, that sounds spooky. So I was like, sure, whatever, and just something in that moment. This is great because it's a lot like a horror movie. Something in that moment, like I could hear the horror movie music soundtrack playing, and I was like, no, it's probably fine. So I guess it made me empathize more with movie victims because I'll just walk through this horrible, dark, empty place on the anniversary when all of those kids died. It'll be fine.
It'll definitely be fine. I think the experience of a game for you shifts the tone a lot. Like, say you hated Super Mario Brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty colorful, like pretty silly. But if you hated that game, you would absolutely be able to explain why that is a terrifying horror game,
mm-hmm.
right? Because your worldview, only worldview. So the fact that this game already starts from a place of it's supposed to be scary and spooky. And I don't know if you did, if you hated this game, then this would have been like a, unrated, don't play this movie in theaters where there's also a church because it'll make all the nuns' heads explode. Kind of like that's your experience may have been disproportionately horrifying. Like I wanted spooky, like what you do with Teddy, like spooky Halloween. And I'm wondering if I accidentally actually pulled you into the lake where all those teenagers drowned skinny dipping.
So that's the thing is that, and I'm wondering where this lands on the spectrum, because I think especially for horror, sometimes it can go spooky, scary, and then campy. You know, like if you dial it up too far, you end up with Thanksgiving.
Or Leprechaun.
Yeah, right. Or Leprechaun. Which one's Leprechauns in Space? The fourth one? Yeah,
it's always the fourth one. Yeah,
it's always the fourth one. Right. Yeah. But what do we play?
So we played Maniac Mansion, and specifically, we played this for the Nintendo Entertainment System. One, because that's the version that I played. Two, sure. You had no dog in this fight, so you didn't vote. I
100% abstained. I should have voted.
But here's the thing: is when I was grabbing the Wikipedia for this, and to find the date, because this game came out for the NES in 1990. But this game originally came out in 87, and I was like, uh-oh. So, because I knew this was a console port, what I didn't realize is one day the team at Lucas Games Film Games woke up and was like, what if we put this game everywhere? And because of the time in history that it was, that is meaningful. So some people played this on a Commodore 64. Some people played this on an Apple II. Some people played this in DOS. We played it on a Nintendo. And those experiences are not interchangeable. The music is the same, but it's being produced by very different hardware. The graphics are attempting to be the same, but they're super not, right? So I say all that to say this, we very specifically played the Nintendo version. So if you remember the Apple II version or the DOS version or something, and you hear a comment that doesn't quite jive with your memories, that may actually not be nostalgia goggles. It may be because the versions are that different. crazy, especially the visuals, crazy different.
I mean, it does floor me that LucasArts flooded the market with a toy, but
I know. It's
just not in character.
Shocking,
you know?
Really.
Yeah.
That's the true horror.
Right. Yeah.
Capitalism.
Not spooky. Scary.
So my nostalgia goggles for this game, my experience was this game is just entirely associated with my older brother. As far as I know, everyone else who played this game must have borrowed it from him. They probably interviewed him for the Nintendo Power about this game. Like, him and this game are like just completely intertwined in my brain. And I think that's interesting whenever we play a game like that, because I don't really associate him with video games generally, but there's just a few that he, like SimCity for the Super Nintendo, right? Final Fantasy IV for the Super Nintendo. Like, there's just a few games that he somehow is like the avatar of that game on Earth. And this is one of them. I suspect, because this is a point and click adventure game, and at the time we would have had this game in our house, I was probably too young to really understand the puzzles and things. So I probably only ever played it with him, because I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself.
I'm today years old and I still don't understand all the puzzles in this thing. So
yeah, there's going to be a lot to say about the design of point and click adventure games. I'm sure.
I'm just saying that if you're pondering whether or not you were old enough to understand the mechanics as a 5-year-old, I can help you with that, because I'm not saying that one of us is smarter than the other. I am saying that 36-year-old me is probably smarter than 5-year-old you. Hopefully.
That's fair. I feel like that's a reasonable enough assumption that we don't have to bust out the time machine and do experiments.
Like go check it. I mean, if so, then people should not have hired me for some of the jobs I've done in my career if I have the intelligence of a 5-year-old, no matter how smart that 5-year-old is.
Counterpoint. People should be hiring me for much more challenging jobs.
I mean, probably both, if this is true, right? So my nostalgia experience for this is, okay, so I don't know for sure if I played this game. I don't think it was, but I've definitely played a point and click adventure game, if not this one very similar to it, in after school care at school on the computer, and we loved it. We had no idea what was going on, but we loved it. And so in lieu of something a little bit more meaty, I remember, this will come back to my nostalgia experience, but I remember at one point I was talking to Megan, and we've told the story before on the podcast before, but these are evergreen episodes, where Megan was playing Myst, right? And she said to me, like, oh, hey, like, I love the game Myst. It was a lot of fun. I was like, really? That does not strike me as a game that you would like. And she said, yeah, I mean, it's cool. You get to walk up and down on the beach. There's a little hut. It's kind of neat. I was like, wait, that's the whole game? And she said, yes. And I was like, okay, no, that was the first puzzle. Like, she just thought it was just a fun beach simulator, right?
And so because of that, probably enjoyed it more than a lot of people who played Myst.
Because she never thought herself to be in a failure state, right? So most people, when they're playing Myst and just stuck on something, they're like, oh man, this sucks and I suck and everything sucks. And for her, it's like, just chilling on the beach, She is the equivalent of like a beach bum versus like a beach bum that wants to be a CEO, like she's just happy to chill on the beach. They say all of that to say, I'm confident that whatever point and click adventure game we were playing Beach Simulator, where we didn't really understand what we were doing or whatever, but we were playing video games at school.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all that mattered,
Well, because of the time in history that we went to school, my memory of getting to play video games at school, because I mean, everybody has Oregon Trail, of course, but my memory of getting to play video games at school was also a point and click adventure on the computer, and we had to earn it. So we had to like earn like good boy points throughout the week, and then you got like 30 minutes of point and click adventure time because that teacher brought his personal computer to school that was powerful enough to play at the time some modern games. So it was like, whoa.
Yeah, no, it's just wild. So yeah, that was my nostalgia experience. I remember being it's in school, I think because we're the same age. We were in the third grade in 1993, and I remember as clearly as your mother's maiden name. What was that again?
It's her name is the same as my social security number, actually. So it makes it easier for me to remember.
You just need to edit in like a huge just bleep. Anyways,
should we chill?
Let's chill.
We should chill. If you enjoy what we're doing, the best way for you to support us is actually just like tell other people to come and listen, because personal recommendations always do the most. You can go leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcasts if you don't like actually speaking to people, but you do want to get the word out. If you want to reach out to us, we're on the Twitters. We have the website. All that crap is in the show notes. And you can see what games we're playing upcoming. We have a super exciting one we're going to play next that we've both been like champing at the bit for basically the entire time we've been podcasting. So that's fun. If you want to go crazy and give us money, you can support us on Patreon. And if you do that, you get access to the after show. Everybody gets access to the after show, no matter what level they support at. But if you support us at a high enough level, we will shout you out. So we want to thank first our 8-bit classics, Kevin,
Minox manipulating Michael,
John,
a sound slinging Sid,
Jason,
a wicked writing Wendy,
and Yarno,
a rock riffing Razor,
our 16-bit heroes, Michael,
a deliriously dull Dave. Sorry, Michael.
Jacob,
a sounds culotizing Sardonian Sandy,
and our full 3D supporter, David.
The boson battering Bernard Bernoulli.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That sounded hard.
It was. And because I was thinking like, okay, which order to go with these in. And so for Sandy, I was getting lazy because that was the last one I did. Is I Googled cool S name, like S words. And I learned 2 new words that I wanted to share with everyone. So sankulotizing is somebody who is radicalizing people. It actually comes from sans culottes, which is means like without, I think it's without culottes, which is, like the lower class of the French. I'm like, there's a lot of history behind that word. Yeah. And then the reason why I settled on boson battering Bernard Bernoulli is he's the scientist, man. And obviously the scientist is the best one.
Obviously. And that's the character you identified with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm glad that you saw representation in the game.
I did. As a straight white male, it's hard to find that in video games.
I know. That's why I had to go deep into the back catalog to find a game that had a straight white male character in it. A bunch, actually.
Yeah. Much less protagonist. It's wild.
Let's talk about the confusing visuals that are very different from what some of our listeners' lived experience probably was. I actually really like these graphics, and if you compare them to the PC graphics, you would instantly become like even more of a fan. Now, that being said, these are Super NES graphics, right? Not Super NES graphics, they are Super NES graphics. They are flat, simple colors, a lot of like dithering gradients in places where they don't necessarily need to be, which can make some things look kind of muddy. But what I found that I liked about this is they really sparsely populated the world in the NES version, where to make the frame rate stay high and to not have like a lot of clipping and flashing and stuff, they pulled out some superfluous details that the PC and like Apple version have, which means if something's on screen, you could probably interact with it. So although the world feels kind of weird in how sparsely populated it is because of the controls, which we'll get to, it's nice that if something is on screen, you probably should acknowledge it. You can either open it or close it or turn it on or turn it off or climb it or, do something. Like there isn't a lot of superfluous detail. So in a point and click style game like this is, I actually thought the simplistic graphics sort of made it more approachable in a way, which I appreciated.
So, yeah, so I can kind of get behind that. So visuals for the sake of visuals, they're actually not that bad, right? Here's the thing that I'm going to start whining about is, So we've often referred to the Home Alone 2, right? Where it's like it's impossible to tell foreground from background and all that sort of stuff, right? That is true of this game in that there's nothing really that says like, hey, this is just like kind of background filigree, right? This is, like it's a cabinet. It's just a cabinet, right? Or something like that. It's really there in most video games, either the background's like dulled a little bit or, like a very repeatable pattern. So it kind of falls into the background. That's not true here. The reason why is because there's so much stuff for you to interact with, right? So it's weird because unlike in Home Alone 2, where I feel like it was done inadvertently, this time I feel like it was done on purpose.
I agree. Yeah.
Which, we'll get into more mechanics, but the issue with that is that the if it's on screen, there's a chance that you can interact with it, but you're so busy figuring out whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think if you should, right? So I think that it really struggles, or from my seat, it really causes the player to struggle with like, okay, there's no guidance, to say like, oh, hey, yeah, like you can interact with everything, but maybe there's not much going on with the clock. So maybe ignore that one. There's no visual affordance to help kind of guide you into like, hey, maybe focus on this thing, or there's a so right off the bat, right, the key under the mat, like I literally got stuck to the point where I had to look up a walkthrough in the first 20 minutes, and by which I mean the first 3 minutes of the game, but the first 20 minutes of me getting frustrated and then saying like literally, walking up to the door, trying all of the buttons on the door, walking, and so then when so I pulled up a video thing and I saw, I'm like, oh, there's a key under the mat. So I went and interacted with the mat, and then I went to the door and it's like, no, man, still nothing. I was like, wait, what? And then I saw, and then just right in line with the mat, right over to the right, there was a key that looked like a kind of a key. And I was like, there is nothing about this visual that draws my attention to it, that lets me know that this is important or something I can pick up. And the weird thing is that's deliberate. Mm-hmm. They're doing that on purpose. Yeah. They want that key to blend into the background because they want you to spend minutes or hours finding it. They want you to spend an hour wandering around that area, then turning off the game, going to the kids the next day on the playground and asking them, holy crap, how do I do this? And then subscribing to Nintendo Power. So it's weird because it's completely antithetical to modern game design,
Yeah, and this is actually an interesting thing that's become a problem in a way for this style of game in modern games is it's on purpose, right? It's exactly what you said. It's not an accident that things are hard to identify. Is this important? Is this not? Like that's part of why people play these sorts of games, is for the feeling of cleverness when they're like, oh, I realized that if you put thing A in place B, that thing C happens, which is logical. Like you can follow the steps, but I was the only one who could, I had to invent Phoenician characters for A to B to C to make sense. So I'm a genius, right? Like that's the feeling these kind of games are going for, because by this time in history and throughout the 90s, they continued to make games exactly like the ones they made in the 80s, even though the technology had moved on, just because this style of game appeals to a certain kind of person. Now, to bring that all the way back to visuals, in their defense, they did do the thing that games in the 70s and 80s and early 90s did, which is they literally tell you where the key is in the instruction manual. In the instruction manual, where it's explaining how to play a game like this. And that's the thing, is this game has more in common with like a board game or a choose your own adventure novel, where you would need to be given instructions, right? Because the kind of feedback you get can't be super obvious, because then that might steer you toward a solution. So you get a lot of like, it doesn't work or nothing happened, because if it said something like, maybe I should look under the mat, like they didn't have the bandwidth to build that kind of thing into the game yet. And then by the time they did, these kind of games have started to sort of like go out of fashion. So what I think is charming about the experience you had is I guarantee you that is the experience that most kids our age would have had when they were playing this game, right? Because even if you're old enough to, right, if you're between 5 and 10, like you're old enough to read the manual, but you're not gonna, right? You just video games, right? You just put it in, you slap it.
Play a video game.
Yeah. And then to couple that with things are all essentially in the foreground, right? 100% of the world is potentially interactable, leads to a lot of just moving the cursor constantly to see if the text lights up, right? Because that is the visual affordance that you do get, is the cursor always highlights a thing that is interactable, or I say highlights, it literally puts text on screen that says what the thing is. But like, so if you hover over the stairs, it's like go to stairs. If you hover over the door, it's go to door. If you hover over the key, it's go to key, right? And that's including if you're in total darkness. That's including if there's enemies on screen. That's including all of the characters. Like if the cursor is over an interactable thing, but that means you're no longer relying on how the world looks. You're relying on this like non-diegetic UI to just tell you like, oh, your eyes have landed on something that is interactable. And it's like, I didn't put the cursor there because it looked interactable. I put the cursor there because I'm checking every pixel on the screen.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And that ultimately the goal of this type of game that's kind of antithetical to even us replaying it now is that the game's meant to just eat through hours of your life. Like it's what it's made for. And we don't have hours of our life to dedicate to this kind of stuff. Even when we're reviewing it for the podcast, it's like, there's a finite amount of time that I can screw around with this, as opposed to, hey, I've got 8 hours and I've got all day. Like I'm just going to sit there and mess around with this. Now, that being said, is that I think that one of the main differences that you hit on is, that would make this more acceptable. I don't know how they would have done it with the hardware at the time, but is somehow, if you're like, because the idea is that you're these kids trying to thwart this evil scientist from doing crazy stuff, right? Lobotomizing someone or something.
He is going to take out your girlfriend's brain.
Yeah, I got there. Anyways, so the idea, though, is that you're in this mansion, you're kind of like sleuthing around and that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out how to kind of solve this puzzle. If there was a diegetic way in which to determine like what things interacted with what things, especially if that diegetic UI was character specific, because each character has a different set of skills and all that kind of stuff, which we'll get into in mechanics. I feel like that would have wildly made the game like easier, more playable, especially, and even more interesting from my seat. To me, it would be very similar to like Batman's detective mode in the Arkham games, where it's like the game is telling you like, hey, check this thing out. It's highlighted, but it's not highlighted because the game's telling me, the idiot, that I need to go do this thing. It's because Batman knows and I am Batman, right? So like if, Bernard like walked in and was like, yes, I get the sciencey things highlighted because that's my skill set. And, the musician walked in and says, oh, I know the musical things. Then I think that would actually help, because then you would say, all right, that's exciting, because like I'm going to play through as Bernard and see, okay, here's where all this stuff is. But no, none of that. No, absolutely no affordance, visual affordances whatsoever, or any guidance. Again, very intentionally.
Yeah, and this is something I actually struggled with throughout, is I don't love point and click adventure games, but some of my favorite games are actually point and click adventure games, which is weird. I don't really weird. It's kind of like horror. Like I really don't like horror, but there are some fantastic movies that I really love that are technically horror movies, and novels that I've read that are horror novels. Like but I never would just say like, oh, I just saw this interesting horror movie, so I just grabbed it, because 99% chance I'm going to hate it. Point and click adventures are the same kind of thing. So, yeah, like the fact that the game was operating as designed creates tension with like, I have to review this as an artifact, not like my personal taste. and just sprinkle a liberal dose of my opinion on top of that objective review.
Yeah, and again, so visuals for the sake of visuals, the game looks very nice. To me, it sometimes looks a little bit overbearing and kind of cluttered visually.
Some of the rooms have like crazy wallpaper and like really over the top colors that are kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the nice thing though is that most of the rooms are colored so differently that you are unlikely to confuse which room you're in. Right. And that is a plus, right? Because if you're like, oh, right, I need to go to this other room, then you can do that. I would also say, okay, so I had this for later, but I think I kind of need to mention it now because it will color it. This, we don't see games like this too much anymore, right? But I would argue that there is something very popular, a game very popular in current popular culture that has replaced this niche. And you know what I think it is?
Walking simulators?
Escape the Room.
Ooh.
This is an escape the room game, you know?
It is mechanically and thematically incredibly similar.
That's what I think is scratching kind of this itch, right? Is that, you put a bunch of people with different skills in a room and you say, now escape it, right? So it's really critical that you not kind of, and so with that in mind, I think that this is a type of game, if you think about it from that type of mindset, probably what they expected. And what I think, again, if I had an infinite amount of time and also care to do this, right, is what this would be really cool, right, is you get a nice little leather bound notebook and you draw out all of the little maps and you say like this room goes to here and then like make little notes of like, okay, I pick these things up here and then, oh man, well when I do thing A, this thing happens. And then you end up with this, kind of crazy person epistolary, almost diary, right, of the game. Like that would be awesome, and I think that would really infuse into the game, right? So I think that that's kind of what the game expects you to do. And it's important, to bring it back to visuals, is it's important then that all of the rooms look very distinctly different. So that way, if you are happening to take notes, even mentally, you can say, right, that's the purple room with all of the couches in it. Right. I remember where that one is. That's the one with the big piano in it. I remember where that one is. That's the one with the long dining table. That's the one with the pipes. That's the one where the pool is. That's the one where the crazy car that shoots in the outer space is. Like you need to know all those things, and those two things can't ever really be interchangeable. So the game does that very well, I feel.
Yeah. First off, I totally agree with you. I absolutely should have played this game with notes, and I think anyone who plays one of these games would probably enjoy it more if they had a little notebook and
like little like post-its, and like like the little things that call out your pages.
Yeah, immersive. It's immersive gaming, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't really think about how profoundly the utterly insane decor is actually benefiting the player. I think you're absolutely right, because there are a couple things you might want to do that involve the power being completely out, and but you can still move about the world completely fine and unimpeded and do things as long as they don't require power. And every time I was like, okay, I need to go, I just went through the secure steel door. So now I'm in this hallway and it's that teal color, which means the stairs are all the way to the right. And then you're walking through darkness. You can't see anything. And then you put your cursor where the stairs should be. And it's like, yup, there they are. And it's because everything has such a distinctive look. The characters, and the environments, which I mean, the environment in this game kind of is its own character. It is the mansion. Yeah, man, you're blowing my mind here, because it's like it's so obvious that why some rooms have like the weird cornflower wallpaper, and then there are like purple rooms and yellow rooms, and it's like, why is this place decorated this way? Oh, because they're crazy. And it's like, no, it's because there's only one the cornflower wallpaper room. There's always one the purple bedroom. There's only one the pink bedroom. So if you are thinking spatially, like those colors are one more anchor for your brain to say, okay, the pink bedroom is next to the purple bedroom, right? And they're in left to right order. And that's not even just an example. Like that is actually how those rooms are on that floor. And I know that because I can see it in my mind's eye.
Exactly. Right. And then it's like, and in the pink bedroom is where this thing happens. And in the, blue bedroom, that's where I find this thing, and, oh, right. Especially because you can, and this is slightly mechanical, but because you can change kids'
New kid.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that's still visual, right? Like that's like I feel like that's I don't know, man. That feels so pejorative. It's like I need a new kid, um, but yeah, it's because you can leave people places, right? So you need to be able to say like, okay, that's right. That's the room with the piano. Well, I actually have somebody that can play piano, so let me go back to that room with that person and interact with that thing. I will say that that's kind of a mechanical note. I was going to say that in a modern game, what I feel that they would do is allow you just to swap what character you have, as opposed to grabbing your character and walking them all the way across. But the way the game works mechanically, as a quick mechanical note, is it's really important that not happen, because you're not walking as a party. You can be in multiple disparate places at once because you need somebody to do something at place A so you can do something at place B. How they're all communicating this through some omniscient we're Jean Grey, right? So we're just keeping the team like psychically linked. But that's
I was thinking they just all have they have like walkie-talkies built into the CD players they're all wearing.
Ooh,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah, but like I'm at
old
the water pump, turn it off. Yeah,
but the old 80s walkie-talkies that are friggin' enormous, and have like the giant antenna on it. Yeah, that's all the meaty stuff I had for notes. So one other throwaway thing for visuals is look, I get it. It's NES, and there's a ton of stuff here and a ton of visuals. So I get why they wouldn't make a specific visual for going up and down stairs, because it happens so infrequently.
It's so bad.
but I'm just confident that anybody who walks down the stairs, that walks down a ladder in the way in which this person is walking down a ladder, would then they dropped to their death and died.
Dude, the original Mega Man has a ladder climbing animation. Like, they could have. It's not that they ran out of bits and bytes. Like, they just decided it wasn't important enough to the game to animate all of, because there's a crap load of characters, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone, all of the villains and all of the heroes can go up and down stairs and up and down ladders. So I get why they didn't want to add like 50,000 extra animations, but you are right. It looks absurd, like shockingly absurd.
It's jarring, because it is fairly immersive. So you'll be kind of going through and you're like, yeah, wait, what? Oh, that's right. I'm playing a video game.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on visuals. They're like, I know we didn't play the other editions, but I just can't get over how much better I think the NES version looks compared to the PC versions of the time. One of them has way higher fidelity graphics. Like, no question, the graphics are better, but I think the art style's worse. So it's like, it's like, yeah, okay, there's more dots, but they're uglier dots.
Why don't you go back and say that about like a mosaic? Like that's a good critique of a mosaic painting. Yeah, sure, it's more dots, but why?
Yeah. Audios.
Yes. So yeah, there's I don't have much for audio in this
one.
Dude,
if you don't say every single track in this is a banger, we are done. The music in this game is excellent, and I will entertain no other opinions.
Stay scientific, Jerry. Yeah, no, yeah, I don't know. I would say that I didn't think that they were necessarily all bangers, but I was not annoyed by them. I did not think that they were bad. I will say that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm pretty confident on this, until you came out swinging so hard on the audio, and now I'm like, I don't know, I'm not sure about anything anymore. Is each kid has his own music, right?
Yes, every single kid has unique tracks, and because you can only have 3 in your party per game, like you can't rotate them. You might play the entire game and not even realize, like, oh, every kid has a unique anthem.
Yeah, which I thought that was really nice. Just because it kind of makes sense thematically, because if you're playing this and it's kind of like a movie, then each person kind of has their little theme song. It's kind of like riding on the bus, like that kind of constant theme. So I really like that. That was the main note that I had, though. All of the sound effects are fine. I didn't.
The sound effects are they're the audio version of simple visual feedback, like click, the door opened, right?
Yeah.
Bang, the door closed. Ka-chink, you picked up the little metal thing, right? Like they are strictly informational. They add basically all of the tone and theming and stuff that's done with audio is all done through music, not through sound effects.
Yeah. That and the one other thing that I'd noticed about the audio that I just thought was weird is and it makes sense because the NES will drop stuff, if there are too many sounds. So you can just turn off the music effectively by turning on the water in an area. Because then it's just like water noise. And again, like, so in my mind, all of the music was the characters like theme songs in their head. I'm like, how loud is this water running that is drowning out your own personal melody that's running through your head, And to me, then
you're walking around with a CD player and you turn on this faucet and it's deafening relative to earbuds, which are pretty loud.
Yeah. So to me, I thought it was kind of like a descent into their madness, So they turn on, it's like, shh, and they're just sitting there staring at the water and the noise is just getting louder and louder. And then the mom comes and throws you in the basement.
And then you just find a bunch of teenage corpses and it's like, oh.
Some threaten me water. With a good time. Something else.
One thing I do have to say about the music is some of the games that we've played for Nostalgia Goggles, like I literally haven't played them since I was, when the game was new. A lot of the games we've played, I played and then maybe I played again like as a teenager and then maybe like even in college or later, right? So the kind of like staggered learning effect can be very different from one title we play to another because depending on repeated exposures and how far apart those exposures were. I know I haven't played this game since it was new, right? Since I was quite young. The second I turned this game on and the music started, I just was transported back to the living room, sitting next to my brother, him probably playing and me just watching. But I just like the opening theme song, even it's just like dun 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 dun, and I was just like, yes, it's gonna be amazing. Like it's incredible how like the effect that has, because like when the title screen starts and you see the mansion, like that's super iconic, right? If you know this game, like the mansion up on the hill and the meteor going through the sky, it's like, especially if you know what the story's about, you're like, oh man, there's the meteor, there's the mansion, right? And it's like, right? But that, at least for me, did not have the same like instant flooding of dopamine effect that the opening music had. And because you always have to the girl you're trying to save, Sandy, is Dave's girlfriend. So Dave always has to be in the party, and then you can pick two other kids. So you always have access to Dave's music, but then you can choose between the other kids. And Razor's theme is pretty good. Bernard's is actually kind of chill, which I sort of liked because I don't know why, maybe because he's the scientist, but he ended up doing a lot of work in my party, so I was hearing his music a lot, so I kind of liked that it was a little bit mellower, because Razor's is like super like 90s rock high octane. So I like immediately sought out the soundtrack on some weeb's YouTube channel where he's got like an anime avatar of him with a poorly photoshopped sweater Luigi on it, and I was just like, I don't care, this kid is my hero, I love this music.
Yeah, no, definitely no nostalgia bias there.
No, not at all.
No, I mean, again, I will definitely defer to you on that one because one, I think you're going to hurt me, and two, and two, it's no surprise to anybody on this podcast that your attention to detail on music is better than mine. To me, the big thing that, like I said, I really thought was nice was that each character had their own theme. And to some degree, because I'd say, and do you have anything else for audio? Because this is a good segue into mechanics.
Just that I do think they also realize that if you take a long time solving puzzles, even the catchiest tunes can get annoying. So they let you turn them off in situ whenever you want. Like,
yeah, which
you
is
just like you can use key on door, you can turn off CD player, and every kid has their own CD player, and so they're literally listening to their own theme music. So even though that's a mechanical detail, I think that's the creators being like, if you're sitting here staring at this screen trying to solve this puzzle, you might want to turn the music off.
Yeah, just maybe. And so the nice thing is, because about, I'd say 10% from my experience of this game is stuff where you need a specific character to do a specific thing, right? The other 90% anyone can do, right? So only the people who know music can interact with the music stuff, but all the rest of it's the same. So I say that to say, for the audio, it effectively kind of lets you pick your track, because if you like the Chill Bernard track, then have him do most of the heavy lifting. If you like, Dave's music, like a monster, then, have Dave do all the heavy lifting, whatever, But yeah, I thought it's interesting how, and they had to make it this way because, again, you may not have Bernard in your party. The game developers can count on you having Dave, right? But that's it. So everything else that is character specific either has to have another solution to the problem or can't be integral to the main plot line of the game. Like you can't need it to finish. It's a secret or an extra or something of that, of which there's like a bajillion things in here that are secrets and extras. There's so much game here. There's a lot of game.
I think somehow this game only has 5 different endings, even though there are entire solutions that are locked behind individual characters. Like the car that like shoots into space. Mm-hmm. The reason that it does that is if you go and get the meteor, because the meteor is the big bad, right? It's evil. It's mind controlling everybody. If you put the meteor in the trunk of the car and then shoot the car into space, you win.
Woo!
One of the girls is a writer, and so you can find a terrible manuscript in the mansion, and if you have her punch up the manuscript and then you mail it off to the company that has the advertisement on the TV in the music room, then they come and they take the meteor away and turn him into a celebrity, and so he leaves everybody alone. Like, there's I think you can help the tentacle like start a band or something. There's like a music way to beat the game. But like there's all the like almost boring by comparison endings where it's like, oh, well, what if you go and you like confront the meteor and you stop? You can make the police show up. Like you can report like a fake crime and then they show up and see the real crimes happening and then they arrest the meteor. Like,
but then the meteor turns into Mr. Nimbus and
controls the police. Yeah, this is, I think, what is attractive about these kinds of games to a lot of people is there is so much game here, right? There's just no other way to put it. It's like there's the speed run for this game is something like 6 minutes, but if you were playing it at a normal pace, it would probably take you like 3 to 8 hours. Like that's a lot. That's a huge difference between knowing what to do and lots of experimentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's nailed it on the head, right? It's all about experimentation. Okay, so for me personally, I didn't have any trust in this game, right? Which is to say that like there's a lot of times in games where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to check every single locker in Fallout 4, right? Or Fallout 3, right? Because I don't need to. I know a developer would not do that to me. They would not force me to do that. No such faith or compunction here. And I feel pretty justified with that. Like they're intentionally doing that, right?
Yeah. And I would say like that is an adventure game genre.
Right.
Consistency, right? Mario has to jump. In platformers, you have to jump. And in adventure games, you click every brick, right? Just what if it does something?
Exactly. What if it does something? And so you click every brick. And so because the thing is that the reason why you can't not is because there are things that just won't make sense unless you've gotten the thing that you need to get, right? So you'll walk up to a door and they'll say, you need a key. And the key was in the bottom of the grandfather clock or something, right? But unless you can interact with the grandfather clock, right? And to me, the world immediately after I got into the third room, I'm like, the world is too expansive for me to like kind of keep track of the things I'm interacting with and things I can't. So you know what that means? That means interact with everything that I can on the first pass and see what happens, right? So let's just argue for a minute that in a room there are, 4 things to interact with, right? And there are 11 actions on the screen, right? There's 11 things you can do. Now, some of them don't make any sense, but I don't have any trust in the game developer at this point to not make me think that I don't need to push or pull or put, for the grandfather clock, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do all 11. You got 3 kids though. So you are now up to over 100 actions, right, per room in order to ensure that you have done all of the interactions you can reasonably do. And that's assuming, again, perfectly linear gameplay, which this game is not, right? So you might very well do all of the things to that thing, right? But, no, you needed to specifically use this item in your inventory, right? Which now is a whole nother thing. So you might as well try using all the items in your inventory on all of the things, because what if the tuna can needs to be placed on top of the stairs because that attracts the zombie guy or the cat, and you need to now catch the cat and put them in your inventory? Like, all of these sound insane, but they are reasonable within the game, which means that you can't just discount it, right? You can't say, oh yeah, there's 50 brooms in this room in Skyrim, but I probably don't need to be walking around with my carrying capacity filled with brooms, probably. Right, there are still some people that play that way. But,
it's unlikely that the big bad in Skyrim is defeated by all of the forks, knives, and plates from the first town's first house.
Yeah, right. You're just like you're dragging this dragon's horde behind you. Like, but if Skyrim was an adventure game, right, it'd be the way that you beat the dragon is you interest him in your huge horde of crap you got from that first room. And that causes them to abandon the Arkenstone, and then you collect that item, right? Like that would be more in line with this type of game. So I say all that to say, for me personally, that just saps the fun out of it, because now it's not a game about it's not an escape the room, right? It's a game about jump through hoops. Superman 64. No, so, yeah, right. So I mean, that's the thing, is that to me is that mechanic, which again, I am not faulting this game specifically for. It is every point and click adventure game that does this. I didn't play a lot of them as a kid, and I certainly have not played a lot recently. And I remember why, because I don't.
So like it. I will raise you that you are actually maybe being too generous.
Wow.
And here's why. So around this time, right? Not way before, not way after, but this was like during the transition time where the PC versions of these games, because these are mostly PC games, right? It's very unusual for a game like this to be on a console, for a reason I will talk about as part 2 of this lecture, is they were starting to get a lot smarter about like reasonable inference. Like if you pick up a jar, right, and you place it into the pool or under the running water, then it will fill it with water, right? So like the inference is you put a jar into water, and so now there's water in the jar. You don't have to say put water in jar, and that's not hyperbole, right? Because text adventure games, which were not that long before this, when you really think about it, did actually require that level of specificity, right? Put hand on knob, turn knob, open door, right? Like not quite that bad, but pretty damn close. And this is obviously like, this grew out of that. It's a visual version of that same kind of thing. My problem with the way Maniac Mansion implemented this, and I mean, LucasArts, the game division at this time, like they were famous for these kinds of games, right? The sequel, which is Day of the Tentacle, Monkey Island, right? Like some of the fondest games from this era are LucasArts point and click adventure games. So they did this thing a lot, right? And this was a early-ish one of their earlier ones. There are too many verbs. There's too many. Why is turn on and turn off separate verbs? Like, push and pull should not be separate verbs. Open and close should not be separate verbs. Like, just assume like interact is the opposite of its current state if its states are binary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't make me like open and close the door. If the door is open and I interact with the door, then close it. If I go to the door, go through it. You know what I mean? So like the problem of like the would it be exponential growth, geometric growth, like logarithmic growth, the rate at which the number of combinations of things you could reasonably attempt skyrockets, partially because they chose to do a lot of these things as like separate verbs, right? Like just turn on and turn off can just be like turn on / off, right? And that would be fine. And I know it's hard to go all the way to just interact, right? Because then the game will infer way too much for you, and then you don't get that same kind of satisfying, like, haha, I figured out something clever. But there is a like a happy medium, a Goldilocks zone, and this is on the wrong side, right? It's like this game is too easy, this game is too hard, this game is just right. Like this one I think errs on the hard side. Something we didn't mention in visuals, but it's more relevant here, is the inventory is only like 2 items tall.
Yeah.
Because there's so many damn things you can do with the stuff in your inventory. So even to get to the things is extra clicks because there's little up and down arrows, right? So to say like, I want to use this jar in the sink to fill it with water, you might have to go like use scroll, jar, sink, right? And then when an item changes, like if something fills with water, for example, it just pops back in your inventory and it doesn't always go back to the place that you took it from. So now like you have this perfect mental map of the mansion, a gigantic building with all these insane structures, but you can't keep track of like what's in your own purse because crap keeps flying into different pockets. Like it's just that creates a lot of the slog. But then the force multiplier for the slog is supposed to be a PC game, and you are supposed to have a mouse. Like you are supposed to be able to very quickly hover over everything on the screen and see if that makes your HUD light up and say like, oh, this must be a thing I can interact with because words appeared on screen. Doing that with the D-pad, like and I feel very confident that this is true because there were a lot of things in this game I remembered, like, oh, you can do this, you can move that, you can combine these things, you can do whatever, right? So like every time I knew exactly what I needed to do, so I was able to do it in an optimal number of clicks and mouse movements with the D-pad, it didn't feel that bad. Every time I had to experiment, it instantly became an insufferable slog. And I was like, oh no, this game can't only be fun when you already know exactly what to do. That's the opposite of what this game is supposed to be.
Right. That'd be like if you walk into the escape room and you just start like you open the thing, you move the key, and you just like blaze through it. And I agree.
That's called just going into your own house. Like I know which key opens the door. It works every single time.
Yeah, it's not escape the room. It's going home. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I do think that there is something to be said, about the interact button, because I do think that there is something to be said about, like, I pick this thing up and I mess around with it, like I pick up the jar and, like instead of saying, or like the door, right? Especially because some of the verbs are so similar, right? So for a door, right? Open and close or push and pull are reasonably the same thing, So I didn't double check it, but if it's like, if you pull on a door, does it open it? If you don't hit open, I don't think it does.
I don't know. This game has a very small amount of inference. Like there's no like walk through, but you do have to like go to, like, if you want to pick something up off the shelf, you have to go to where that thing is and then say get the thing. But if you just say get the thing, like if the thing you're trying to get is on the screen you're on, you don't have to scroll to get to it, and you just say get the thing, you will walk over to it and get it. So there's like little places like that where there's a small amount of inference, but that's almost worse because then you're like, could I have just been pushing all the doors? I don't know.
Well, and so basically, to me, and this is kind of my big thing for this, is that because of not only is a lot of that stuff a slog, but there's and the developer doesn't really engender trust. But this game is all, from my seat, all consequences, no choice, right? Which is to say that a lot of the stuff that you do, you cannot possibly know the outcome of that thing. So therefore, you are now faced with consequences for the thing that you did, right? But that's not a choice, right? So if I don't know that turning on the downstairs water summons the brother from upstairs to come down and beat the mess out of me or throw me into the dungeon, right? Or if I don't know the fact that being thrown into the dungeon is not an ultimate failure state, that there's a brick in there that just opens the door and lets me out, right? Like those are all consequences. It doesn't mean that I really have a choice in it, right? So to me, a good example of kind of consequences in a video game, right, is in because consequences can be used. Normally, it's used to kind of jar the player and kind of remind you, hey, that you do have choices and be careful with the choices that you make. So, for example, in Chrono Trigger, where if you do the RPG thing and you rob everyone blind, like you would in every single RPG, it bites you later. But it does bite you relatively quickly later.
Yeah, and in a way that doesn't then ruin your save file.
Yeah, right. That doesn't, all of a sudden, like you're done, right? But again, that is a consequence, right? Because you have absolutely no reason to think in this RPG at that particular cross section of time that this would have that thing, right? So this game is just all consequences, no choice. And because of the way some of the consequences are linked up, what it really made me think of, because I was like, I'm having trouble putting this into words, but tell me if you remember this from when you were a kid, right? Remember how like we would have some of those riddles and stuff that we would all like tell each other, and we figured out. So the one that I remember was, you're in a room, there's nothing in the room, only a mirror. How do you get out? And I remember telling my dad this and him being like, and I told him the solution. He was like, fine. I couldn't understand his irritation because obviously you look in the mirror, you see what you saw, you take the saw, cut the mirror in half, two halves make a hole, and you crawl out the hole. Right? Did you not do these when you were a kid? Like we had like a million of them.
No, I mean, I don't know that one anyway, but that's that's fun because I don't think like you couldn't just easily translate that. Like that works in American English.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. It works,
which makes it almost like it's almost like poetry. Because it's like, you can't just straight up translate this. Like the words and the way they sound super matters.
Well, and the thing is, it's really, really because, and this is way afield and tangential, but like one of the things that they say about, puns, the reason why you find puns like hilarious as a kid and then less so as an adult is because you're just learning that part of language. And so it's new and interesting. So jokes like this are really helpful for kids and you think that they're amazing because it's like, but you see, saw can mean two different things. Isn't that cool? And look, two halves make a hole, but hole as in like a whole thing, but hole is also in the hole you can crawl out of. Isn't that cool? And I remember telling my dad that thing and him being like, okay, like what? Sure. And being like, no, isn't this amazing? Like, look at how clever. And that was the thing. He says, remember, I was like, look at how clever I am for having the solution to this problem. And it's like, but the solution is nonsense. That's what I think of when I'm thinking of some of the solutions to this game, right? Where it's like, yeah. So to your point of like it can make you feel clever. This is not ubiquitously the case, right? But some of the times when it's like, yes, look at this clever thing I found out. It's like, yeah. And you take the two halves, make a hole and you crawl out the hole, Yeah. Yes. Clever,
Yeah. And I think that's part of what makes a game like this difficult to critique as an art object is because I use that phrase almost ironically, like I'm making fun of people who are like, games can't be art, right? It's like, yeah, they can, shut up. But this game has more in common with like a physical puzzle or like a book, like a whodunit murder mystery than it does with a lot of modern video games because the point is two halves make a whole, right? Like it's these Lucasfilm games are renowned for their silly humor, for their writing, for the characters and the visual and like personality design. Like if you don't like those things, these would all be terrible because that's all that they are. There's no mastery of the controls that it's like, oh, well, I'm able to beat this boss because I can, dodge and duck and dart and weave and jump and backflip better than you can because I'm super good with a Nintendo controller. Like, and you could play this with your feet. Like, it's just not, you never have to make quick reactions. There are times you can do things with quick reactions, but you don't need any quick reactions to finish the game. So it's almost like I'm trying to critique the pages and the binding of a book without talking about any of the content in the book, but they are inseparable, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I really love this music. I find the NES version of this artwork fairly charming, but it's like, but if you're not willing to go through 8 billion permutations of like throw baby in pool, then it's not charming enough to deal with that.
Yeah, like a great example is and these are like my last two notes is so the Hunk-O-Matic machine makes you stronger, right? And yeah, like you said, like it's just kind of a kitschy joke, but it's like, okay, so I did like 3 lat pull downs, and now all of a sudden I have this new untold Herculean strength, right? It's like getting the gauntlets of ogre power or whatever in Ocarina, right? Where all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I can lift huge boulders over my head. And so, and also too, like there are some things that, like, so for example, and this one I saw in a walkthrough, so I did not get to this myself, because I was beating my head against the wall so hard that I was like, I need to see more of this game, and I'm not confident that I'm going to be able to do that. So I kind of wanted the solution to some of the puzzles, so I could be like, okay, how far off was I? And I was like, I was pretty far off, but that's because the bullseye was the ravings of a madman. So there's the car, right, that you can use the yellow key on. Now, if you use the yellow key on the trunk, there's tools in the trunk that you can then later use for other stuff. If you accidentally use it on anything but the trunk, the car fires off into outer space forever, right? It's just gone with the tools, right? So that's to me, like, kind of, again, the example of consequences, like there's no two halves make a hole and you crawl out the hole, right? Because there's no reason to think that I'm going to plug this key into the ignition and all of a sudden it's going to Rick and Morty Jerry's car style, like grow all of these amazing sci-fi appendages and then fire off into space. That's not a reasonable assumption, but that is what happens. Now, once you know that happens, you can internalize it and move on, but it's happened now. Like, you just got to live with that.
And there's 2 important things that as we segue into the end here, that I think these 2 things are really worth considering, because I really like your framing of consequences, because a lot of adventure games let you save and save scum. And this game does let you save, but you can only have one save file at a time. So that means you can't write mechanics that allow you to save yourself into a corner, which this game will absolutely do. This game does have dead ends, and some people like that, some people don't, but you need to know that, right? And the game doesn't tell you that. You would just eventually realize, like, oh, I can't, like, I screwed too many things up. It is impossible now for me to be successful. And
I left the pool drain for too long, so it blew up the mansion.
Yeah. Right. Like you would lose minutes, maybe, 15, 20 minutes at the absolute most. So we're not talking hours of wandering aimlessly, but like you could lose some time. Right. And that can be a really frustrating experience. The fact that they allow that, I think, is like an unfortunate side effect of, we wanted there to be a lot of solutions to the ultimate problem of beating the game, and a lot of branching paths, and some of those branching paths lead to unfortunate dead ends. And personally, I'm okay with that trade-off, as long as realizing you did the wrong thing and victory is now impossible is like very quickly thrown in your face, right? If you turn off the cooling to the nuclear reactor, an alarm sounds for about 30 seconds and then the mansion explodes and everybody dies. And it's like, okay, that is not a way to win because everyone is dead now, right? So
kind of a win condition, right? Because then the meteor can't cause any more issues because
you're specifically trying to save Sandy's life. So you did not save her life.
Well, I would argue that dying in a nuclear explosion that immediately incinerates you is better than having your brain cut out. So it's better.
This is binary. You either saved her life or you don't.
Okay. All right. That's fair. I'm just saying that like I afforded her a better death.
You're going to take that C- and like it.
Yeah.
Right. So, but before we talk about whether or not we thought the game held up, I have a section in my notes that's called random nonsense. And sometimes I put stuff there and it just drifts out into the rest of the show. Sometimes there's nothing there. This game has one particular story that I feel compelled to tell because if you are on the fence about whether or not you want to deal with these mechanics for the charm of the writing, this is the story that will tell you. If you find this charming, then okay. If not, you could probably just pass right now. There is the mother and father, right? The doctor and the nurse. It's like Frank and Edna. And then their son, who's like a weird kind of like paramilitary weird guy. So he has a hamster in his room. If you go and get the hamster, you can put the hamster in the microwave with some ingredients and kill it and cook it. And then if you present the hamster to him, he goes, because you can subdue him by giving him some other food. I think it's cheese. But if you present the cooked hamster to him, he goes, no thanks. Hey, why does this have fur on it? This fur looks like my hamster's fur. Oh no. And then it just smash cuts to a picture of the outside of the mansion with 3 tombstones. Because you enrage him so much, I think reasonably, that he kills you and your friends.
I think that's because not only did you kill his hamster, you killed it in the pretty awful, gruesome way. So
yeah, no, he is, and you broke into his house to do it. Even the fact that you're there to save your girlfriend, he didn't kidnap your girlfriend. He doesn't even know that your girlfriend has been kidnapped. So, but I just think like the fact that some programmer or programmers were like, okay, we're going to make it so that you can get his hamster, kill and cook it, and then serve it to him. And then the consequences for that action is that he kills you and your friends and you have to start the game over. Because there's lots of different ways to die in this game. There are lots of different dead ends you can unfortunately save yourself into, and then victory becomes impossible. But just the fact that they took the time, like that's the kind of writing, right? That's what this universe is. This universe is one that a loss condition is trying to serve a militant teenager his own hamster as a sandwich, and then he murders you.
Yep. So if you're into that type of thing, what do you think, man? Did it hold up?
So I waffled between Nostalgia Monocle and Full Nostalgia Goggles, and I settled on Full Nostalgia Goggles because this game is at least for me, was the definition of all of the parts of this I like are the parts I remember fondly, right? Mm. So, and my problem with that is I know that I don't particularly love adventure games, but because some of my favorite games are point and click adventure games, it's not that I just write off the whole genre. I just don't think this is a particularly good implementation of that genre. Like there's too many verbs. Going through the inventory is a chore. Having to move the mouse with the D-pad is a chore. Like maybe playing this on the PC version on like a big monitor where you have like more real estate would clean up some of that, because you can move the cursor faster. You can get through your inventory and all the verbs faster and experiment a little faster. But I just think they're on the wrong side of literally typing words into a box like old-fashioned text games were, right? It's closer genealogically to that than you would want from like a more modern game that will do a little bit of inference. So here's the thing. I actually really enjoyed playing this because I have super fond memories of it. So if you have super fond memories of this game, go for it. Even just to listen to the music, go in, put the hamster in the microwave, get thrown in the dungeon, push the brick, feel super clever because you remembered where that brick is, and like, you know, burn an hour on it and have a good time. But like for anybody else, not only would I not say it's probably worth putting up with all the nonsense, but all of the other versions don't look like they really address, because they even remade this game later. There's like a deluxe version or something I hadn't even heard of, but it doesn't look like they did anything except make the graphics nicer. So yeah, probably pass and just listen to the soundtrack on YouTube, like full nostalgia goggles.
So I am also going to go with full nostalgia goggles. You know, I mean, like, is the game, to me, this game is actually like lawful evil in the sense of, you know, it, like we kind of said, you know, it does so many things. You're like, oh my God, this is such a slog, but that's what it meant to do, you know, like that's what it wanted to do, right? You know, it's hard to tell things apart from the background. That's on purpose. It's really easy to get confused and turn around. That's on purpose, right? What I would say, honestly, is if you remember this game fondly, is I would say do one of two things. Or if you're like, oh, I never really got into Maniac Match and I'm thinking about giving it a shot, do one of two things. One, don't go play and escape the room. You know, just go do that. You know, that will scratch that same itch and do better. If you do really want to go and get into it, I mean, honestly, go get a nice leather-bound notebook and treat it like a true crime thing, and just really, you got to go all in. This is not like a, you know, like you said, you could probably just queue it up for an hour and just kind of toss an hour or whatever. But like if you're saying, no, I'm going to try this for the first time, then go all true crime story in on it, right? You know, but honestly, like, did it hold up, man? I could push, I could pull, I could give, I could open, I could close, I could go to, I could get, I could use, I could read, but ultimately, I need a new kid.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained at the end of it all. Gamers play what we play. Game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is sad, but who cares? We both know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure already in sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right in the world. Is sad. You're more along for the ride.